Night settles over Florence like a velvet curtain, but the city does not sleep. Bells toll from Santa Maria del Fiore, rolling over narrow streets where torches gutter in the wind. In a tall stone palazzo near the river, a man waits in the dark. Outside, angry voices echo in the square. Boots strike stone. Somewhere, a door is being broken down. Inside, Cosimo de Medici presses his palm against a cold wall and listens. He can smell wax and ink. He can hear the faint clink of coins in the room beyond, where ledgers lie open like secrets. For years, those ledgers have been his power, lines of numbers tying Florence to Rome, to kings, to merchants across seas. Tonight, they might become his death sentence. The ruling family, the Albizzi, have turned the city against him. Tyrant, they whisper, usurer, spider in the shadows. Outside, the mob swells. Inside, Cosimo's brother murmurs, "We can still run, we still have time." Cosimo only shakes his head. He knows the city too well. He knows that Florence is not ruled by whoever shouts loudest in the square, but by whoever holds the invisible threads: credit, debt, favor, fear. He also knows that those threads can snap. The door crashes open. Men with steel in their hands and judgment in their eyes step into the room. Torches flare, casting long, trembling shadows over shelves of ledgers and chests of coins. "Cosimo de Medici," a voice declares, "by order of the Signoria, you are under arrest." For a moment, Florence holds its breath. This is the night a banker will be tested. This is the night a dynasty will either break or begin to rule a renaissance. Soft call to action. If you'd like to keep walking these stone streets of history with me, step closer, like, subscribe, and stay as the story of the Medici unfolds in the shadows of Florence. City of stone and silver. Morning crawls slowly over Florence, turning the gray line of the Arno into a ribbon of pale gold. The night's chill still hides in the shaded alleys, but the city is already awake. Hammers ring in distant workshops. Carts rattle over cobblestones. A baker's boy hurries past with a basket of warm loaves, the smell of bread drifting behind him like a promise. On the Ponte Vecchio, the old bridge crowded with shops, the real heartbeat of Florence is already pounding. Metal clinks on metal as coins change hands. Fingers stained with ink and dust slide small weights across tiny brass scales. The voices are low but intense. Latin phrases, numbers, foreign names, all tangled together. Here, in these cramped stalls by the river, the future of the city is being written in copper and silver. At a narrow table set beneath a small wooden awning, a man with tired eyes and steady hands studies a handful of coins. His name is Giovanni di Bicci de Medici. His clothes are simple, but the cloth is good. His hair has begun to thin, but his gaze is sharp and restless. He listens more than he speaks, and when he does speak, people tend to fall quiet. "Genoa's coin is light," he murmurs, running a thumb along the edge of a piece. "They shave it." His assistant, a younger man with ink on his sleeves, frowns. "Will we take it?" Giovanni pauses, weighing not just the coin but the choice. "We will," he decides, "but at a discount. Risk has a price." He does not say the rest out loud. That risk, properly measured, is where a man can make his fortune. Around him, Florence is a storm of ambition. Wool merchants argue over cloth brought from England, the air thick with stray fibers that cling to skin and clothes. Goldsmiths hammer tiny leaves of metal until they are thin as breath. Priests pass through the crowds, robes brushing the dirt, their faces half serene, half calculating. The great families, the Albizzi, the Strozzi, the Pazzi, move through this world like armored ships, proud and heavy, weighed down with titles and old pride. The Medici are not yet among them. Giovanni's father had been a modest man, a small-time banker whose fortunes rose and fell with the unstable winds of trade and politics. Giovanni grew up knowing the feel of scarcity, of a household where wax was used carefully, where shoes were mended twice before replaced, where the sound of a knock at the door could mean opportunity or disaster. He learned early that money was more than metal. It was trust. It was fear. It was hope made solid and passed from hand to hand. Now, as he sits at his stall and watches the river slide beneath the bridge, he can sense something changing. The world beyond Florence is shifting. Kings and princes no longer fight only with swords. They fight with loans, with promises, with debts. The church itself, rich and powerful, needs men who can turn scattered tithes and offerings into organized wealth. Giovanni has heard the whispers. The Pope in Rome is frustrated. Corrupt collectors, chaotic accounts, money lost in a maze of small, greedy hands. The Curia needs a man who can bring order to chaos without drawing too much attention to himself. That kind of work is risky. It is also perfect for a man like Giovanni. He closes his hand around the Genoese coin, feeling its weight press into his skin. Risk has a price. So does caution. By midday, the sun stands high, washing the city in a bright, unforgiving light. The square by the cathedral is crowded. Stones lie piled where the great dome of Santa Maria del Fiore is still a question instead of an answer. Men argue in front of sketches and models. How do you roof a church without wooden beams? How do you cover such a vast space without it collapsing? No one is sure yet, but the city believes someone will find a way. Florence is like that unfinished dome, Giovanni thinks as he walks past the chatter and dust. Beautiful, ambitious, but fragile. It wants to reach higher than anyone has ever dared, but it could all fall in an instant. He passes a group of wool workers, their backs bent, their hands red from washing and dyeing. One of them mutters, "They say the bankers grow richer while our children go hungry." Another laughs bitterly, "God will judge them." Giovanni hears the words and they stay with him. He knows the resentment that clings to his trade. The church itself struggles with it. Is interest sin? Is profit an insult to God? The questions hang in the air of Florence like smoke. Later that evening, in a small room lit by a single candle, Giovanni sits over a ledger. The parchment glows warm in the flickering light. Numbers march across the page in neat rows, steady and precise. Names are written beside them: merchants, minor nobles, a monastery, a guild. Each line is a promise, a connection, a thread. He dips his quill in ink, then hesitates. His wife, Piccarda, watches from the doorway, her hands folded in front of her. "You haven't eaten," she says quietly. "I will," he answers, though his stomach feels tight. "Giovanni," she says, "you're not just adding and subtracting. You're building something. Don't lose yourself inside it." He looks up at her, eyes softening. "If I do not build, others will, and they will not think of you or our sons." The names of his children, Cosimo and Lorenzo, form silently in his mind. They sleep down the hall, unaware that their father is playing a long game with the fate of their family. Giovanni touches the page lightly, as if he could feel the future in the faint ridges of ink. He has chosen a path that walks a line between sacred and forbidden. To lend money is one thing, to lend to the church is another. Already, he has sent cautious letters to Rome. Already, answers have come back in guarded phrases, wrapped in polite uncertainty. "Your reputation for honesty is known to us," one letter had said. "Perhaps, in time, a more formal arrangement can be considered." Honesty. The word had warmed him, but he knows it is not enough. In Florence, a clean name is a valuable thing, but it is also a fragile shield. Rival bankers whisper that the Medici are too bold, too hungry. Old families sneer that men who sit with ink under their nails will never truly belong among those who have ridden in armor and bled for the city. Yet when the tax collectors come, when wars must be funded, when bridges must be repaired and towers rebuilt, it is not steel that pays, it is credit. It is the promise that money will be there when needed. One rainy afternoon, Giovanni is summoned to the palace of a powerful man from the Albizzi faction. The stone hallway smells of damp and old wood. Torches spit and crackle, casting jumping shadows on tapestries that show battle scenes and saints. The Albizzi are everything the Medici are not. Ancient, proud, tied to a long line of warriors and magistrates. "Sit," the nobleman says without standing. His voice is cool, his eyes colder. "We hear your bank will be working more closely with Rome." Giovanni feels his heartbeat pick up, but his face stays calm. "We serve any client who honors their commitments," he replies. "Florence benefits when credit flows." The nobleman leans forward. "Florence benefits when it is guided by those who know how to lead. Do not mistake coin for authority, Messer Medici. Remember your place." The words sting, but Giovanni bows his head. "Of course," he says, "I have no wish to rise higher than God allows." When he leaves the palace and steps back into the street, rain taps softly against his hood. He walks slowly, each footstep ringing faintly on the wet stone. The Albazi can afford to speak of place because theirs is already secure. His is not, yet he has seen a truth they refuse to see. The world is changing. Leadership is no longer only about the sword. It is about who pays for the sword, who keeps the army fed, who can move money across borders faster than armies can march. Power is shifting from the battlefield to the counting house, from the armor rack to the ledger. That night, Giovanni stands by the window of his modest but growing home and looks out over the city. Lamps glow in scat. Aired points, tiny constellations of human effort. A dog barks in an alley. Somewhere, a drunk sings a half-remembered hymn. The air smells of rain and smoke and wool and hope. Florence is not a peaceful place. It is anxious, competitive, full of grudges, but it is also alive, brimming with talent and hunger. Giovanni knows that if he can learn to read its moods, its fear of poverty, its pride, its dreams, he can do more than survive. He can shape it. He presses his hand lightly against the glass, feeling the cool of the night on the other side. One day, he thinks, people will talk of the Medici as they now talk of the Albazi. One day, his children will not bow their heads in noble halls. They will be the ones others bow to. But first, he must take the greatest risk of his life. He must tie his fortunes to Rome. And in Rome, as everyone in Florence knows, rewards are great, but so are the dangers. A low mist curls over the fields outside Florence as Giovanni's small party rides out, the city shrinking behind them, its towers like dark fingers reaching up from the fertile valley. Hooves thud softly on the damp earth. A mule laden with chests and leather bags trudges along, each step a dull jolt of metal within, coins, ledgers, sealed letters. The sky is a pale gray canvas, slowly filling with color. Giovanni pulls his cloak tighter against the chill. Beside him, a younger clerk named Matteo squints into the distance, nervous and excited. "Do you think they will choose us?" he asks. Giovanni doesn't answer at once. Clouds drift over the hills. "In Rome," he says at last, "they will not choose a name. They will choose reliability. Quiet helps. Humility helps. But in the end, they will choose the man who balances risk and trust." "And that is you," Matteo presses. Giovanni's mouth curves in a faint, tired smile. "We will see." Days later, the smell of Rome reaches them before the city walls do. A mixture of dust, incense, sweat, and old stone baking in the sun. The city is bigger than Florence, heavier with history. Statues stand broken in weed-choked forums, reminders of an empire long gone, while new power sits in high, guarded palaces wearing robes instead of armor. Inside the Vatican, the air is thick and dim. Tapestries line the walls, muffling sound. Candles sputter in iron holders. Men in rich garments move through the halls speaking in low Latin, their words flowing like slow rivers. Here, the church is not just prayers and hymns. It is administration, politics, survival. Giovanni waits in a small antechamber, hands folded, eyes lowered. The marble beneath his feet is cold, even through his boots. He feels the weight of Florence on his shoulders, the hope of his household, the murmurs of rival bankers who would gladly see him fail. A papal official, his fingers heavy with rings, finally appears. "Messer Medici," he says, measuring him with a single sweeping glance. "His Eminence has reviewed your proposal. The Holy See requires clarity, stability, Discretion. You understand the delicacy of handling church funds. I do, Giovanni replies, his voice low but firm. I understand that the church carries the souls of men. My task is only to carry their offerings safely. The official studies him, searching for arrogance, for greed, for any sign of danger. He finds only calm. Very well, the man says. We will begin, cautiously, a share of the collections in a few regions. If you serve well, more will follow. He leans closer, his voice dropping. Do not fail us, Medici. Those who mishandle the wealth of the church do not find mercy easily. Giovanni bows, his heart pounding. I will not fail. When he leaves the Vatican and steps into the bright Roman courtyard, the sun makes him squint, but inside, the path has sharpened. The Medici Bank is no longer just a local player among Florentine houses. It has taken hold of a lifeline that runs through Christendom itself. From tiny villages where peasants drop coins into wooden boxes, to bishops who sign orders with shaky, ink-stained hands, money will flow through the Medici network like blood through veins. In Florence, the changes begin quietly. A new ledger appears on Giovanni's desk, thicker than the others, bound with a strip of worn leather. Matteo, back from Rome, places it down with something like reverence. Collections from France and Germany, he says, and more to come. Giovanni runs a finger down the blank first page. Soon, it will fill with numbers, names, and dates, a record of faith measured in coin. At home, the house is livelier now. Servants move with a bit more assurance. The pantry shelves no longer go bare at the end of winter. In the courtyard, young Cosimo, still just a boy, plays with a wooden ball, kicking it against the stone wall while his younger brother Lorenzo chases it, laughing. One evening, the boys burst into their father's study, breathless and flushed from running. Giovanni looks up from his ledger, quill hovering over a row of figures. Baba, Cosimo says, using the childish name he hasn't yet grown out of. They say you helped the Pope count his money. Is that true? Giovanni smiles faintly, something like that. Does that make you important? Lorenzo asks wide-eyed. Giovanni sets the quill aside and gestures them closer. Important is a dangerous word, he says. What I do makes us useful. And in these days, being useful to powerful men can protect you or put you in peril. Cosimo frowns. How can numbers be dangerous? Giovanni studies his eldest son's earnest face. Because numbers are promises, he answers softly, and men have killed for less than a broken promise. He invites them to look at the page. Columns of neat numbers march down like soldiers in formation. Cosimo leans in, eyes narrowing, curiosity already kindling. How do you know it is all correct? He asks. I check, Giovanni says. Again and again, careless men go bankrupt. Careful men may live long enough to see their grandchildren. Years pass. Florence continues its restless dance. The Medici Bank grows, branch by branch, city by city. In Venice, a clerk with a Medici seal on his ring records the purchase of spices that will flavor the tables of princes. In Geneva, another writes letters of credit to merchants heading north. In Bruges, under heavy skies and the calls of seabirds, Medici agents tally profits from wool and cloth. Bills of exchange, thin sheets of writing that stand in for heavy coin, move faster than carts and caravans. Trust, once local and fragile, becomes a web stretching across Europe. With each new branch, Giovanni's name travels farther. With each success, resentment in Florence deepens. In taverns, men speak the Medici name with grudging respect and hidden jealousy. They were nothing, a Strozzi cousin mutters over wine. Now the Pope himself bends his ear to them. In the council chambers, old families exchange wary looks. The Medici do not swagger in armor. They do not boast of victories in the field. But they are everywhere, quiet and effective, lending money here, forgiving a debt there, making friends in low and high places. The church's relationship with money remains uneasy. In sermons, some friars thunder against usury, their voices echoing off stone walls. Gold, one cries, is a chain that pulls souls to hell. And yet, even as he speaks, the church's projects, its cathedrals, its missions, its courts, are quietly supported by banks like the Medici. Faith and finance locked in an awkward embrace. Giovanni walks a narrow path between righteousness and reproach. He speaks often of fairness, of avoiding cruelty in collection, of giving alms to balance profit. But he knows there are those who will never see what he does as honest work. To them, a banker will always be a man with one hand in heaven's purse. One winter night, as wind howls through narrow streets and frost gathers at the edges of window panes, Giovanni feels a sharp pain in his chest. He grips the edge of his table, breath shallow. Piccarda rushes to his side, fear flooding her eyes. "You must rest," she begs. "You are not a young man anymore." "I cannot rest," he gasps. "Not yet, there is still so much to set in order." In the weeks that follow, he moves more slowly. His hand trembles sometimes when he writes, but his mind stays clear. He spends more hours than ever with Cosimo, now a young man, serious and watchful. One evening, father and son stand together near the window, looking out at Florence darkened by night, lit only by scattered flames. "Do you see that city?" Giovanni asks. "Yes," Cosimo answers. "Every light you see," his father says quietly, "belongs to someone who owes or is owed, to someone who fears poverty or desires more. Money moves them as the wind moves the leaves. You must learn to feel those currents, not just count them, feel them." Cosimo nods slowly, absorbing the words like a sponge soaking up water. Behind them, on the table, the Medici ledgers lie open, their tidy columns catching the candlelight like lines of soldiers waiting for orders. Giovanni has built something vast and intricate, a structure of trust and calculation that reaches beyond Florence, beyond Italy, into the heart of Christendom. But structures, no matter how carefully built, rest in the hands of fate and in the temper of cities. Florence is volatile. Alliances shift, factions clash, tempers flare. Great men can fall in a single vote, a single rumor, a single bad season. The House of Medici now stands tall, but taller too is the shadow it casts. In the years that follow, the name Medici begins to pass from mouth to mouth with a new weight. It does not happen in a single great leap. It happens in quiet increments, in the quick nod of a grateful merchant whose loan saved his business from ruin, in the way a priest's voice softens when thanking Giovanni for arranging a discreet transfer of funds for a new chapel roof. It happens in the small smiles of craftsmen whose wages are paid on time because their patrons have access to ready credit. Giovanni's bank grows like a vine, rooting itself first in Florence, then sending tendrils outward. One chilly morning, with mist crawling low along the Arno, a messenger from Rome arrives at the Medici counting house. His cloak is stained from travel, his face drawn, but his eyes are bright with importance. As he steps into the modest but orderly room, the smell of ink and metal fills his nose. Shelves line the walls, stacked with ledgers bound in leather. Clerks move carefully, like acolytes in a temple. "Giovanni di Bicci de Medici?" the messenger asks. Giovanni rises from his desk with measured calm, though his heart gives a small, sharp thud. "You have found him," he replies. The man draws out a sealed letter, the wax bearing a crest that makes everyone in the room pause, the mark of a high church official. Giovanni takes it with steady hands, but he feels the eyes of his clerks on him, feels the silence settle like dust. He breaks the seal. The letter is written in formal Latin, full of curved flourishes and careful phrases, but the meaning is clear. Rome wishes to move more of its financial business through the Medici Bank. Collections, payments, transfers. The church will need a trustworthy partner in Florence and perhaps beyond. Giovanni reads it twice, then lowers the parchment slowly. His son Cosimo, now a young man with serious eyes and a quiet smile, stands at his shoulder. "Is it what you hoped?" he asks. Giovanni turns to look at him. The candlelight catches the lines at the corners of his father's mouth, the gray in his beard. "It is more," Giovanni says softly. It is an opening and a test. Cosimo takes the letter and reads it, his brow furrowing slightly as he moves through the formal language. He has grown up in these rooms, falling asleep as a child to the scratching of quills and the murmur of numbers. To him, the smell of parchment is as familiar as the smell of bread. "What will you do?" he asks. Giovanni gives a small, wry smile. "We will say yes, carefully." That decision reshapes the Medici Bank. Soon, couriers come and go more often. Letters arrive from Rome, from other Italian cities, even from beyond the Alps. The Medici begin handling papal funds, organizing a network of branches that can move money where it is needed with a speed that seems almost magical to their clients. In a dim back room, Cosimo bends over maps spread across a table. Tiny stones mark cities: Florence, Rome, Venice, Geneva, Bruges. He traces routes with his finger, imagining the movement of gold and silver, of credit and paper. "If we place a branch here," he says to his father, pointing northward, "we can serve the church and merchants trading wool in the same road. One journey, two profits." Giovanni nods slowly. "You see the lines," he says. "Good, but remember, every line is also a tie. We tie ourselves to their fortunes as much as they tie themselves to ours." Cosimo looks up. "Is that not dangerous?" "All true opportunity is," Giovanni replies. "We must be ready to bear the weight." Not everyone is pleased with the Medici's quiet expansion. In the shaded cloisters of a monastery, two older men walk slowly, their footsteps echoing off cool stone. "This banker, Giovanni, he meddles much in church affairs," one says, fingers worrying at the beads of his rosary. "Money is needed," the other answers, shrugging. "Better it pass through the hands of a man said to be honest than through thieves." "But can one grow so rich and remain clean?" the first presses. "Usury it is a sin." The second man sighs. "The world is not simple. Even sin can be managed, weighed, reduced. Perhaps that is what these bankers think they do." Their words drift like smoke, part of a larger unease. In noble palaces, too, voices turn sharp. The Medici, an Albizzi cousin, spits during a family dinner, wine sloshing slightly in his cup. They rise too fast. A woman at the table, her hair veiled with fine cloth, frowns. "Because they are clever." "Because they are dangerous," he snaps. "They feed on the needs of others. Today they serve the Pope. Tomorrow, who knows, they will imagine themselves princes." A silence follows, heavy and thoughtful. Back in the Medici home, life moves with quieter rhythms. Picarda supervises the household, making sure servants are paid fairly and food is stored for leaner times. In the evenings, the family gathers to eat. The talk often turns to politics, to the guilds, to distant wars. Cosimo listens, absorbing not just facts but tones, the fear behind certain names, the respect given to others. He sees how his father chooses his words carefully, never boasting, always modest in public. Yet in private, Giovanni's eyes are clear. "One must not appear to rule," he tells Cosimo one night, after the rest of the household has gone to bed. The candles burn low, smoke curling upward like thin ghosts. Florence hat. "Ease tyrants, even when it needs them." "Then what must a man be?" Cosimo asks. "A servant," Giovanni says, "at least in the eyes of others, a servant of the city, of its needs. But inside," he touches his chest lightly, "inside one must see the larger pattern. One must know when to say yes and when to say no, when to lend and when to deny. That is how you guide a city without a crown." Cosimo considers this, feeling both the weight and the strange allure of such a life. Years pass. The Medici Bank weaves itself deeper into the fabric of Europe. Profits grow. The family moves into a finer house, though Giovanni insists it not appear too grand. "We do not provoke the wolf," he says. "We feed it from our hand, make it think we are nothing more than a friendly shepherd." But time is a creditor, no one escapes. One autumn, when the air smells of crushed grapes and wood smoke, Giovanni falls ill. At first, it seems like a passing fever. He insists on sitting at his desk, signing documents, dictating letters. His hands shake, but the lines of his signature remain firm. Rest, Picarda begs him. The bank will not vanish if you close your eyes for a day. He smiles faintly. If you could see the world inside my head, wife, you would know how hard it is to put it down. One evening, Cosimo finds his father staring at an open ledger, the quill still in his hand but unmoving. The room is quiet except for the soft crackle of the fire. Is something wrong? Cosimo asks gently. Giovanni shakes his head, but his eyes are distant. No, everything is as it should be. He taps the page lightly. When I was a boy, I thought wealth would feel like a mountain of gold, solid, unshakable, but it is not so. It is more like this. He gestures to the numbers. Lines, agreements, belief. If enough people stop believing, it all fades. Cosimo steps closer. They believe in you, he says. Giovanni looks up at his son, pride and worry warring in his gaze. That is precisely what frightens me, because when I am gone, they must learn to believe in you. Not long after, on a gray morning when the bells of Florence toll slow and deep, Giovanni di Bicci de Medici dies. The house is filled with the muted sounds of grief, quiet sobs, footsteps softened by deliberate care, the rustle of cloth as mourners pass. Outside, rain streaks the windows. Inside, candles burn around the bed where Giovanni's body lies, hands folded, the lines of worry smoothed from his face. Cosimo stands at the foot of the bed, feeling as if the air has grown heavier. The rooms around him are the same. The ledgers still wait in the counting house. The bank continues to move money, to receive letters, to make decisions. But the man who taught him how to read the city, how to measure risk and reward, is gone. A family friend, an older merchant with a worn, kind face, touches Cosimo's shoulder. Your father was a good man, he says quietly. He did much for Florence. Cosimo swallows, his throat tight. I do not know if I can fill his place, he admits. The man gives a small, knowing smile. Places are not filled in a day. You will grow into it, or you will fall from it. That is the way of our city. At the funeral, as the procession moves through the streets, some people bow their heads with respect. Others watch with unreadable expressions. In the shadows of doorways, a few narrow eyes follow Cosimo, weighing him, judging him. The son, someone whispers, we will see what he makes of this fortune. Another voice, lower, more cautious, we will see if the Medici remain useful, or if they become a problem. Cosimo feels the weight of those unseen words, even if he cannot hear them. He walks with measured steps, each one a kind of vow. He will not let his father's work crumble. He will not let the bank that has tied Florence to the wider world fall into ruin. But as he takes his place behind the desk where Giovanni once sat, as he signs his name to letters that will cross borders and affect kings, he does not yet know that the fortune he has inherited is not just money. It is a web. It is a web that reaches into Rome, into rival families, into the whispers of priests and the ambitions of merchants. It is a web that will one day tighten around his own neck, as Florence turns on him the way it has turned on so many before. For now, though the quill is light in his hand, the ink is fresh. The city outside hums with business as usual. But somewhere, in a high room where old families gather to talk over wine, a voice is already saying, watch the Medici boy. One day he may think himself more than a banker. The years after Giovanni's death move like a slow, heavy river, and Cosimo learns how to swim in it without making too many ripples. He does not thunder into Florence as a conqueror. He moves carefully, almost shyly in public. At guild meetings, he speaks in a level tone. In the signoria, when he is called to advise, he bows to the authority of others. On the street, he is polite, modestly dressed, a man who could almost be mistaken for an ordinary merchant. But those who handle ledgers, those who move in the deeper currents of the city, know better. In the Medici counting house, the atmosphere changes under Cosimo's hand. He brings in more clerks, trains them personally, and insists on order. Shelves are reorganized not by habit but by logic. Branches in one section, papal accounts in another, private loans in a third. He introduces new methods for recording exchange rates, for calculating risk. The scratching of quills becomes more constant, more controlled. One afternoon, a clerk frowns over a letter from a northern branch. The merchant in Bruges asks for an extension, he says. His ships have been delayed. Cosimo leans over his shoulder, reading quickly. Grant it, he decides, but raise the interest by a fraction, and send word that we expect his next cargo to pass through our agents. If we share his risk, we share his profit. The clerk nods, impressed. You are generous, Messer Cosimo. Cosimo straightens, his face unreadable. No, I am careful. Generosity is what people call it when caution happens to benefit them. The papal accounts tie themselves tighter to the Medici. The church's money flows in growing streams through Cosimo's hands, and with each successful transaction, the trust in his bank deepens. But trust in Florence is always double-edged. In the great family's palaces, beneath painted ceilings and between tall stone columns, there are gatherings, dinners, councils, private conversations. Candles burn low, wine flows, and words sharpen. Cosimo grows quiet and powerful, one Albizzi patriarch observes, fingers tapping the table. He supports certain candidates in the Signoria. He funds certain projects. He puts men in his debt. A younger relative scoffs. He is a banker. He moves numbers, not soldiers. The elder man's eyes narrow. Soldiers are paid with numbers. Never forget that. Back in the streets, the effects of Medici money begin to appear in ways that ordinary people can see. A hospital receives a much-needed repair. A small monastery is able to feed more of the poor. A new workshop opens, its tools paid for by a discreet loan. Cosimo understands something his rivals do not. That influence does not only live in high chambers, it lives in full bellies and roofs that do not leak. One day he walks through a poorer district with a trusted agent, a man named Puccio, who has known the family since Giovanni's time. The smell of tanned leather and boiled cabbage hangs in the air. Children run barefoot, dodging carts and shouting to each other. "Why do you come here yourself?" Puccio asks softly. "You could send me." Cosimo watches a woman ladle thin stew into wooden bowls. "Because numbers on a page are not the whole truth," he says. "I must see what they look like when they're turned into bread or hunger." They stop at a small church, its facade cracked, its roof patched in a dozen places. Inside, candles flicker before worn icons. The priest, a tired man with kind eyes, bows deeply when he sees Cosimo. "Your father helped us once," he says. "We remember." Cosimo offers a slight inclination of his head. "Florence remembers those who help her," he replies. "If the roof fails this winter, send word, quietly." The priest's eyes shine with a mix of gratitude and unease. "God bless you, Messer Medici." As Cosimo leaves, Puccio murmurs, "That will not be cheap." Cosimo's gaze tracks a crack running down the church's outer wall. "It will be worth more than it costs," he answers. "Not in coin, in memory." Word spreads, as it always does, that the Medici are generous, that they build, that they repair, that they keep their hands open. In taverns, men raise cups to their health. In markets, people say, "The Medici, they are different. They remember the little people." But for every grateful whisper, another whisper turns poisonous. They buy loyalty with alms. A noble complains as he walks with a friend along the Arno. They drape their ambition in charity and call it virtue. His friend shrugs. "Is that not how many men rise?" "Yes," the noble replies, "and if they rise too high, it is how they fall." Cosimo knows they talk about him. He expects it. He reads it in the way certain men greet him with smiles that stop just short of their eyes. He hears it in the pauses that follow his name at council meetings. One evening he stands in his study looking at a small painting propped against the wall. It is a Madonna, finely done, the colors rich and gentle. The artist, a young man with hopeful eyes, had brought it earlier that day, palms sweating as he set it down. "To thank you," the painter had said, "for your support. Without your loan I would have no workshop." Cosimo had studied the painting, his fingers laced together. "Art," he said slowly, "is a kind of promise, is it not? A promise that men can make something beautiful in a hard world." The painter had nodded, surprised by the depth of the question. "Yes, messer." Cosimo had smiled faintly. "Then keep your promise, paint, work, honor your gift." Now alone, he traces the outline of the Madonna's face with his eyes. There is peace in it, a peace he rarely feels. He wonders briefly if his life among numbers will ever allow him such serenity. Piccarda enters quietly, a shawl around her shoulders. "You are thinking too much," she says gently. "I am thinking exactly as much as this city demands," Cosimo answers, but his voice softens when he looks at her. "The wind is changing. Can you not feel it?" She steps closer, following his gaze to the painting. "Florence has always had storms," she says. "Your father weathered them. You will too." Cosimo's eyes darken slightly. "My father built a bridge between us and Rome. Bridges are strong, but they can also give enemies a road straight to your door." In the Palazzo Vecchio, the seat of Florentine government, discussions grow more heated. The Albizzi, the dominant family in power, watch the subtle spread of Medici influence with growing alarm. They lend to our allies, they fund public works, they pay for churches, for charities. One Albizzi complains during a closed meeting. People praise them more than they praise those who actually govern. "Then perhaps," another says coldly, "it is time to remind Florence who truly holds authority." The decision is not made in 1 hour or in one room. It forms slowly like a storm cloud gathering on the horizon. Complaints are gathered, accusations refined. The word tyrant is sharpened like a blade. Cosimo, for his part, continues to work. He finances the construction of convents, supports scholars, quietly pays for repairs where others have failed. He believes, perhaps naively, that service will shield him. But Florence remembers its history too well. It has thrown out would-be masters before. It has stained its own streets with the blood of those who thought themselves above the law. On a late summer evening, as the sky burns gold and then deepens toward purple, Cosimo stands on a balcony, looking over the red roofs of Florence. The air is warm, but there is a strange tension in it, like the way the city feels before a storm. Below, in the narrow streets, a group of men move with purpose, their faces set, their words hushed. In the distance, bells begin to toll, not in celebration, not in mourning, but in summoning. In that moment, somewhere between sunset and darkness, the paths laid down by Giovanni's careful banking and Cosimo's quiet expansion converge with the fears of the old families. Florence, the city of stone and silver, is about to decide whether the Medici are its saviors or its threat. And when the decision comes, it will not arrive in a polite letter or a quiet conversation. It will arrive with the slam of doors, the shout of armed men, and the echo of a name called in accusation. Cosimo de Medici, the banker who thought he could rule without a crown, is about to learn how quickly a city can turn on the hands that feed it. Cosimo, the banker who ruled without a crown. Florence wakes to a strange unease. The sky is clear, the streets are the same narrow ribbons of stone, the Arno still murmurs along its banks. But there is a tension in the air, as if the city itself can sense that something in its balance is about to shift. On the Piazza della Signoria, soldiers gather in small knots. Steel glints in the early light. Voices are low, but the weight of their presence is loud enough. A few merchants arriving to set up stalls pause, watching, then decide, wisely, to move along. Inside the tall, stern walls of the Palazzo Vecchio, The halls smell of wax and sweat and old power. Steps echo on the stone floors. Torches flicker, throwing uneasy shadows on painted shields and carved beams. In a room not far away, Cosimo de Medici has no idea that the city has already begun to close its fist around him. He sits in his counting house, the familiar scent of parchment and ink calming his mind. Outside his window, he can hear the everyday sounds of Florence, a woman calling to her child, a cart bumping over cobblestones, a dog barking at nothing in particular, the normal rhythm of life. On the table before him lies a letter from Rome, bearing the seal of the Pope's officials. It speaks of new business, new opportunities, new trust. Cosimo reads it with measured satisfaction. Every such letter is another strand in the web his father began to weave. He takes up his quill to write a reply when the door opens without a knock. His steward, eyes unusually wide, steps in. Behind him are two men in the red of the city guards. Their hands rest on the hilts of their swords. Cosimo's fingers still. Ink pools at the tip of his quill. "Messer Cosimo," the steward says, voice tight. "These men, they come from the palazzo." One of the guards steps forward, unrolling a scroll. His voice rings in the quiet room. "Cosimo de Medici," he declares, "by order of the Signoria, you are commanded to present yourself at once to answer charges against the Republic." The words fall like stones into a still pool. Charges, Republic. Everyone in Florence knows what those words can mean. For a heartbeat, Cosimo says nothing. He studies the man before him, the tightness in his jaw, the slight tremor in his hand. Fear, he realizes, is not just his own today. "What charges?" Cosimo asks calmly. His voice does not rise. The guard hesitates. "You will be told at the palazzo," he replies. "Our orders are to bring you, now." In the corner of the room, a young clerk shifts nervously, the tip of his quill scratching a dark mark into the ledger he had been pretending to continue. Cosimo places the quill down with care, closes the inkwell, and stands. "Very well," he says. "I am a citizen of Florence. I will answer my city." As he reaches for his cloak, his steward leans close, whispering, "Shall I send word to our friends? To the guilds, the clergy?" Cosimo's eyes flick to the open ledger on the table, then back to the guards waiting in the doorway. "Yes," he murmurs, quietly, "tell them what has happened. Tell them to remember what we have done for them." He walks out of the counting house flanked by the guards. The street seems narrower than usual, the stones harder under his feet. People turn to look as he passes, their faces a mix of curiosity, worry, and something like satisfaction. "They've taken Cosimo," a woman whispers to her neighbor. "Taken for what?" "For being too powerful," another voice answers. "For thinking he could rule through coin." At the corner, Cosimo catches sight of Puccio, his old agent, standing half in shadow. Their eyes meet for a brief moment. "Stay calm," Cosimo says quietly, as if they were discussing a delayed shipment, a minor debt. "This is only another kind of account to settle." Puccio's jaw tightens, "And if they refuse to balance it?" "Then we find another way," Cosimo replies. But even as he says it, he feels the weight of the Palazzo Vecchio looming ahead, a stone giant with a long memory and a short temper. Inside the palace, the air is cool and smells faintly of damp stone. Cosimo is led down corridors he knows well, but never from this angle, as a summoned man, not a welcomed advisor. At last he is brought to a small chamber with thick walls and a high, narrow window. A table stands at the center. On the far side sit several members of the ruling signoria, their faces grave. Among them is Rinaldo degli Albizzi. Rinaldo's gaze holds no warmth. He has long feared the slow, quiet rise of the Medici, the way they win hearts with loans and charity while his own family relies on older forms of authority. To him, Cosimo is not just a banker. He is a rival. "Cosimo de Medici," Rinaldo says, his voice smooth. You stand accused of plotting against the liberty of Florence, of using your wealth to bend the republic to your private will, of seeking in secret what no citizen may hold, a tyrant's power. The words would be laughable, if not for the deadly seriousness behind them. Cosimo bows his head slightly. I have served Florence with my wealth, he replies. I have lent to the city when others would not. I have supported its churches, its hospitals, its trade. If that is a crime, then I stand guilty of love for my home. A murmur passes among the men at the table. Some look away, uncomfortable. Not all of them hate the Medici. Some owe Cosimo far more than they would like to admit, loans that saved their estates, gifts that helped their children. Rinaldo's eyes harden. Fine words, he says. Yet your love comes wrapped in influence. You place your men in high positions. You fund those who vote in your favor. The republic will not be bought like a piece of wool in the market. Cosimo meets his gaze steadily. Florence is not a piece of wool, he says quietly. She is a living thing. She must be fed, clothed, protected. That costs money. Someone must provide it. For a moment, the room is utterly still. It would be easy, right now, to shout, to fight, to hurl accusations back. But Cosimo knows the city he lives in. He knows that Florence despises open arrogance most of all, so he chooses a different path. I will answer any questions this council has, he says, spreading his hands. I ask only that I be treated as a citizen, not as an enemy. The council retires to confer. Cosimo is left alone with the guards in the chamber, the silence thick around him. Through the high window, he can see only a slice of sky. It is very blue. Time stretches. Footsteps echo in nearby halls, then fade. Cosimo thinks of the counting house, of ledgers left open, of letters waiting to be written. He thinks of his wife, of his children, of his father's face the day he spoke about belief. Then the door opens again. You will be held, a guard announces, until a verdict is reached. Held where, Cosimo? SKS. The guard looks at him with something like pity. Below. The prison beneath the Palazzo Vecchio is a world apart from the bright spaces above. The air is stale, with a sour, damp smell. The walls are rough, carved from stubborn stone. As Cosimo is led down the narrow staircase, each step feels like a descent into the mouth of the city itself. His cell is small, with a low ceiling and a straw-covered bench. Light filters in through a slit near the top of the wall, more suggestion than comfort. When the door slams shut behind him, the sound reverberates in his bones. He sits slowly, letting his eyes adjust to the dimness. This, he thinks, is what it feels like when the ledger turns against you, when all the credit you have given, all the favors you have extended, are suddenly called in at once. Far above, Florence goes on, markets open, hammers ring, bells toll the hours, but in the silence of the cell, time moves differently. It becomes a series of breaths, of thoughts, of memories. Cosimo's fingers trace the rough stone wall beside him. He thinks of his father's words, one must not appear to rule, one must appear to serve. Had he failed at that? Had he risen too fast, too high, made too many enemies? No, he tells himself, I have done what was needed, and I am not as alone as they hope. Even now, he knows, messengers are moving through the streets, priests are whispering in sacristies, merchants are talking in back rooms. The question is not simply what the Signoria will decide. The question is, what will Florence tolerate? Up above, in a house not far from the palazzo, Puccio and other loyal men gather in a shuttered room. Maps and letters are spread across the table. The air is thick with worry. They mean to break him, one man says. Rinaldo has wanted this for years. Puccio shakes his head. Break him and they break the credit of half this city. How many owe the Medici their homes, their trade, their bread? A merchant slams his fist down. Then we must remind them. Remind the Signoria who pays their soldiers, who funded their last war, who built the very walls they hide behind. They begin to plan. Because Cosimo may be in a cell, but his true strength has never been in his own two hands. It has always been in the countless hands that owe him, trust him, need him. And if those hands move together, if voices that were once grateful now grow angry, Cosimo's prison might not be as solid as the Albizzi believe. For now, though, in the cold quiet below the palazzo, one man waits and listens to the faint, distant heartbeat of a city that must decide between fear and memory. Days in the cell do not pass so much as blur. There is no sun to watch cross the sky, only a pale shaft of light that shifts slightly as the hours move. Time becomes the sound of footsteps in the corridor, the clank of keys, the scrape of a bowl set on the floor. Morning is thin gruel. Evening is thicker gruel. In between there is thinking. Cosimo forces himself to think like a banker even here, even now. Fear is like debt. If you let it grow unchecked, it consumes everything. So he breaks it into parts. He takes stock. The Albizzi are strong. They control the current signoria. They have pushed for this. They will press for the harshest punishment, not because of any single crime, but because of what he represents, a rival center of gravity. But the Medici are not weak. The bank is woven into Florentine life. His allies are not loud men with swords, but men who sit at tables and sign papers, priests who keep accounts, guilds that need credit. They move slower than soldiers, but they move. One afternoon the door opens. For a moment Cosimo thinks it is another guard. Instead, a small, stooped priest steps inside, clutching a rosary. His face is lined, his eyes kind. "I asked to hear your confession," the priest says softly. "They granted it. Perhaps they think a man in your position has much to confess." Cosimo studies him. Recognition flickers. This is the same priest whose cracked church he once promised to repair. "I have sins like any other man," Cosimo answers, managing a faint smile. "But I do not think Florence has imprisoned me for those." The priest moves closer, lowering his voice. Word spreads even through stone. Many are uneasy about this. Many remember your father, they remember you. "Memory is a fragile shield," Cosimo murmurs. "Not when it is shared by thousands," the priest replies. He reaches into his sleeve and draws out a scrap of folded parchment, pressing it into Cosimo's hand under the cover of an embrace. "For your soul," he says aloud, as if offering a blessing. When he is gone and the outstep of the guard has faded, Cosimo opens the scrap. The writing is hurried, cramped, but clear, Puccio's hand. "We move. The wool guild speaks for you. Many merchants sign a petition. Some in the Signoria fear the anger of Rome if you are killed. The Pope's envoys watch. Hold firm. They are divided." Divided, the word lifts something heavy from Cosimo's chest. If his enemies were united, his fate would be simple and short. Division means there is still an account to be balanced. He folds the scrap and hides it in the straw. Up in the palazzo's higher rooms, the debate seethes. Rinaldo degli Albizzi's voice slices through the chamber. "Exile is not enough," he insists to his fellow magistrates. "A man like Cosimo does not wither in exile. He grows, he plots, he returns. We must cut out the rot, not simply move it." Across the table, another member of the Signoria, older and broader, shakes his head. "Kill him and you make a martyr," he warns. "You provoke Rome. You risk merchants closing their purses, guilds turning sullen. He is tangled in half the city's accounts. Do we destroy our own foundation to rid ourselves of one man?" Rinaldo's lip curls. He is not one man. He is a bank dressed as a citizen. He feeds on Florence. Better to suffer hardship now than slavery later. A third voice, quieter but firm, speaks up. "You talk of slavery, yet you argue that we should act as tyrants. Is that not a bitter irony?" So it goes, hour after hour. Anger against caution, fear against calculation. Lists of his supposed crimes are read out, supporting certain candidates, funding certain works, hosting gatherings in his palazzo. None of these things are illegal. All of them together can be painted dark. In back rooms, Medici allies work in their own way. A wool merchant speaks privately with a Signoria member whose son owes the Medici bank. If Cosimo dies, he says, what happens to our debts, to our credit? Do you trust the Albizzi to give you the terms you now enjoy? A prior from a respected monastery takes another aside. We were rebuilding our dormitory with Medici funds, he murmurs. If those funds vanish, we will have to turn away the poor at our gates. Is that to be on your conscience? Coins slide across tables, promises are made, quiet warnings are given. In a city of numbers, no decision is ever purely moral. It is always an equation. Below in the cell, Cosimo sits with his back against the wall, eyes half closed, listening. Through the stone he cannot hear words, but he can sense the rhythm, the rise and fall of argument, the bursts of louder sound. The city is thinking. He remembers standing beside his father years ago, looking at an account that would not settle. Some debts, Giovanni had said, are not meant to be paid in coin. They are paid in time, in patience. Now, patience is all Cosimo has left to spend. One night, footsteps stop outside his cell. The door opens. A guard stands there, flanked by another. Their faces are shadows in the flickering torchlight. On your feet, the first says. The Signoria has reached a decision. You are to be brought before them at once. Cosimo rises. His heart beats faster, but his hands do not shake. He smooths his tunic as best he can. There is straw on the fabric, dust on his sleeves. He is not the composed banker of the counting house now. He is a prisoner. As he walks up the narrow stairs, the air grows cooler, sharper. At each landing he hears faintly the life of the palace. A murmur of servants, the distant clink of metal, the low rumble of men talking. Somewhere a window is open, and a breath of Florence's evening spills in. Smoke, river damp, the faint sweetness of baked bread. He wonders, as he climbs, whether this is the last time he will smell his city as a free man. The council chamber is lit by many candles, their flames trembling slightly in the draught. Shadows leap on the stone walls like restless ghosts. The men of the Signoria sit arrayed behind the long table, their faces set. Some will not meet his gaze. Rinaldo degli Albizzi sits in the center. Cosimo de Medici, he says, voice carrying through the chamber, this council has deliberated. We have weighed your actions, your influence, the danger you pose to the liberty of Florence. The room feels suddenly smaller, the walls closer. You stand accused of seeking to make yourself master of this republic. Some here have argued that such ambition deserves death. A stir runs through the room. Cosimo hears his own heartbeat in his ears, a dull, steady drum. Rinaldo pauses, letting the words sink in. But others, he continues, have warned of the risk, the anger, the division such a sentence would cause. We are not blind to the reach of your bank, to the ties you have spun. He leans forward slightly, eyes like chips of stone. Florence will not be held hostage by fear of one man's debts, he says, but neither will she ignore the reality of her own fragile peace. He sits back, the silence stretches. The council has decided on a sentence, Rinaldo finally declares. One that removes you from our city, yet spares your life. One that declares to all that Florence will not be quietly bought. Cosimo feels the world narrow to the next breath, the next word. You, Cosimo de Medici, Rinaldo pronounces, are hereby banished from Florence for a period of 10 years. 10 years? The words land with a strange double weight, not death, but exile, the cutting away of a man from his home, from the very web he has spent his life weaving. In that moment, in the flicker of candlelight and the rustle of robes, Cosimo must decide how to accept this fate, with defiance and fire, or with something more controlled, more dangerous. Because exile is not only a loss. In the hands of a certain kind of man, it can also be a weapon sharpened in silence. Cosimo lowers his head, like any citizen bowing before the law. But inside, in the quiet center of his mind, he begins already to calculate. For a long moment after the sentence is spoken, no one moves. The candles hiss softly. The parchment on the table rustles in a draught. Somewhere outside these walls a bell tolls the hour. It could be any day in Florence. But for Cosimo, time has just split in two. The life he has known and the life he must now forge in exile. He bows his head. "I submit to the judgment of the Republic," he says, his voice steady. "I have no wish to stain Florence with blood on my account." To some ears it sounds like surrender. To others it sounds like restraint. To a very few, those who know how deep the Medici's roots run, it sounds like a warning wrapped in humility. As he is led from the chamber, Rinaldo's eyes follow him with cold satisfaction. "See how he goes quietly," Rinaldo murmurs to a fellow magistrate. "A man who flees rather than die is not a hero, he is a coward." The other man does not answer. He is imagining something else, how the markets will react when word spreads, how the flow of credit will shift, how Rome will look on this act. Florence has gambled and he is not entirely sure on what. Cosimo is not returned to his cell. Instead, he is taken back to his home under guard, to gather his things before leaving the city he has served and shaped. The Medici palazzo feels different under the gaze of soldiers. The familiar scent of beeswax and clean linens, of ink and wool, now mixes with the metallic smell of armor. Servants stand aside, their faces pale. The courtyard echoes with low, anxious whispers. In an upstairs room, Picarda waits, hands clenched together. When Cosimo enters, she goes to him at once, touching his face, as if to reassure herself he is still solid, still alive. "What have they done?" she breathes. 10 years, he replies quietly. "Exile." Her eyes widen. 10 years away from Florence. "Or until Florence remembers herself," he says, "whichever comes first." Their son Piero, older now, his health fragile but his mind sharp, stands by the window looking out over the rooftops. "We won't survive this," he says bluntly. "The Albizzi will strip our allies, take our clients. They'll bleed the bank dry." Cosimo steps closer, laying a hand on his shoulder. "Only if we let them," he answers. "Listen to me. The Medici are not a building. They are not a room full of ledgers. They are a network of trust. That network does not vanish because I am pushed across a border." Piero swallows, anger and fear fighting in his gaze. "What do you want us to do?" "Stay calm," Cosimo says. "Keep the branches working. Honor every promise. Pay every clerk. Meet every obligation. If anything, be more generous. Let Florence feel what it is like to have Medici reliability while Albizzi rule." He looks from his son to his wife, holding their eyes one after the other. "They think they send me away alone. They are wrong. I am leaving with half this city's memories in my favor. That is not a small thing." Outside, night gathers over Florence. The next morning, Cosimo leaves. The streets are lined with people. Not an official procession, no banners, no trumpets, but a crowd that has formed on its own. Faces press in doorways and at windows. Men stand with arms folded. Women clutch children to their sides. Some bow their heads as he passes. Others simply watch, their expressions torn between fear and loyalty. He rides a simple mule, not a fine horse. His cloak is plain. He looks less like a fallen prince than a tired merchant on a long journey. As he passes the small church he once repaired, the priest steps out, raising a hand in blessing. "Florence may forget," he calls, voice carrying over the quiet crowd, "but God remembers those who built her charities." A murmur runs through the people. A guard glares at the priest, but does not dare silence him. Near the gate, Puccio falls into step by Cosimo's side for a few moments, close enough to speak, not so close as to be dragged away. "We will keep the work going," Puccio mutters. "We will remind them who paid their debts." Cosimo nods. "Do nothing rash," he cautions. "Let their own hunger speak for us." He looks back once, just before passing under the dark arch of the city gate. The red roofs stretch out, the dome of the unfinished cathedral rising like a promise yet to be sealed. For an instant, his chest aches so sharply, he has to close his eyes. Then he is through the gate, and the walls of Florence stand between him and the life he has known. Exile takes him to Venice. The city on the water is a very different creature, sleek, secretive, built on reflection. Instead of the hard clatter of hooves on stone, Cosimo hears the drip of oars, the slap of waves against wood. The air smells of salt, tar, fish, and spices from far-off lands. He rents modest rooms near a canal and resumes what he knows best, banking. In Venice's markets and meeting houses, men are curious about the Florentine exile with the steady eyes and quiet manner. "You're the Medici," a Venetian merchant asks over a table scattered with coins and contracts. "The one they threw out." "One of them," Cosimo corrects, a faint smile touching his lips. "Florence is full of Medici. The city will have a hard time throwing us all away." He is careful in this foreign place, but he is never idle. Letters fly from his hand like arrows, to Rome, to Bruges, to Geneva, to the Medici branches still operating. He keeps the network alive, feeding it from afar. Meanwhile, in Florence, the Albizzi discover the hidden cost of their victory. The first sign is small. A local guild, long funded by Medici credit, balks at new terms offered by Albizzi-aligned bankers. "Your rates are higher," they say. "Your conditions stricter." "We do not run our business like the Medici," the bankers reply, proud. "Perhaps you should," the guildsmen mutter. Then a tax must be raised, a wall repaired, a military company paid. The Signoria turns to the city's financiers. Without Medici coordination, money moves slower. Agreements are harder to reach. Those who once depended on Cosimo's skill find themselves in a maze of competing interests. In churches, people whisper. "When Cosimo was here, the hospital had funds," an old woman says as she lights a candle. "Now they say there will be fewer beds." In taverns, men slam cups on tables. "They call him a tyrant," one scoffs, wine sloshing. "Yet my cousin kept his shop because of a Medici loan. What have the Albizzi ever done for him?" Within a year, the mood has shifted. In the Palazzo Vecchio, the Signoria changes, as it always does, rotating its members. The newest council is less friendly to the Albizzi. Some owe the Medici Bank more than they owe Albizzi gratitude. Others simply see the strain on Florence's trade and fear for their own fortunes. Envoys from Rome arrive, polite but pointed. "It is unfortunate," they say, "that your city chose exile for a man who handled our accounts so well. We have had some complications since." The suggestion hangs in the air. Perhaps the Pope's warmest financial favor no longer rests on Florence. Ronaldo feels the ground shifting beneath his feet, but he does not believe it can crack. He underestimates how a city can change its mind when its purse begins to ache. In Venice, in a house overlooking a quiet canal, Cosimo receives a letter marked with a familiar seal. He opens it slowly, scanning the neat lines. His eyes linger on one sentence. "The Republic of Florence, having reconsidered in the interest of civic peace and prosperity, hereby lifts the sentence of exile on Cosimo de Medici and invites him to return." Invites. He almost laughs at the word, but he feels something else too, not triumph, not yet, caution. There is always a price. Puccio, visiting from Florence, watches him. "Well?" he asks. Cosimo folds the letter carefully. "Florence calls," he says. "We will answer, but we do not rush. We return as citizens, not conquerors." "You could come back as more than a citizen," Puccio presses. "The people are ready. The Albizzi are hated. You could." Cosimo raises a hand. "I could become exactly what they accused me of being," he finishes. "A tyrant. No, we return as servants. We return as men who lend, who build, who listen. The rest will follow on its own." When Cosimo rides back through the gates of Florence at last, the crowd is larger than the day he left. This time, there are no guards at his side. People press forward, hands reaching out. Some try to touch his cloak as if he carried luck with him. Bells ring from towers. From a window, someone throws flowers. They fall around him, scattering over the street like small, bright coins. He lifts a hand in greeting, not high, not like a ruler. Like a neighbor. In the Palazzo Vecchio, Rinaldo degli Albizzi hears the noise and feels a chill. The same city that once let him imprison Cosimo now cheers for the banker's return. Within months, the Albizzi are the ones sent into exile. Cosimo steps carefully into the space they leave behind. He does not take titles beyond those any citizen might hold. He does not sit on a throne, but projects begin to appear with the Medici name behind them. The completion of the Great Dome, the rebuilding of monasteries, the funding of libraries. In meetings of the Signoria, his voice is calm, his M. and are humble. Yet when decisions are made, they often bend in directions that suit the banking family who saved Florence from its own short-sightedness. He has become what his enemies feared, not through force, not through crowns or proclamations, but through the slow, invisible gravity of trust. In a quiet moment years later, Cosimo walks alone through a cloister garden. The air smells of rosemary and stone warmed by sun. He hears the distant chant of monks, the soft splash of a fountain. A young boy sketches in the corner, charcoal smudging his fingers. Cosimo pauses, watching. The child looks up, startled. "I'm sorry, Messer," the boy stammers. "I did not mean." Cosimo smiles. "Do not apologize for seeing," he says. "Florence will need eyes like yours." He moves on, but the image lingers. A child with the spark of art in his hands, in a city now rich enough, stable enough to nurture such sparks. Cosimo has ruled without a crown, and his city has begun to bloom. But in the distant halls of his own house, another boy is growing, sharp, charming, restless. A grandson. A boy who will be called the Magnificent. And where Cosimo has woven power with patience and coin, Lorenzo will wage his battles in a different theater. One of poetry, festivals, and blood spilled beneath a painted ceiling. Lorenzo the Magnificent and the theater of power. Dawn spills over Florence in color. The red roofs catch a soft glow, the bell towers rise like fingers reaching for God, and the Arno reflects the sky in a wavering band of silver. But inside the Medici palace, the day begins not with prayer, but with poetry. A young man leans over a table by an open window, the breeze stirring the edges of the parchment before him. His hair is dark and unruly, his eyes bright and alive with restless energy. Ink stains his fingers. His name is Lorenzo de Medici. He is barely more than a boy, but the weight on his shoulders is already that of a prince, though officially, Florence has no princes. He pauses, listening. From the courtyard below comes the sound of hooves on stone, servants calling to one another, the clatter of crates being carried inside. The palace is a hive, and he is its center. Beyond its walls, Florence buzzes with trade and argument, prayer and plotting. All of it, in some way, will touch him. Lorenzo sets down his quill and reads the lines he has just written, a love poem, soft, musical words. For a moment he smiles at his own handiwork, then the smile fades. Poetry is joy, but it is also refuge, and Lorenzo does not have the luxury of living only in refuge. A knock at the door. "Enter," he calls. Piero, his father, steps in, walking with the careful, uneven gait of a man whose body has never matched his ambitions. Piero de Medici is called the gouty, sickly, often in pain, but determined to hold the fabric his own father, Cosimo, wove. "You're awake early," Piero says, eyeing the parchment. "Verses again." Lorenzo gives a half grin. "Would you prefer I write interest tables?" Piero snorts. "Florence already has men who can do that. What it needs from you is something rarer, charm, wit, a face the city can love. He limps to the window, looking out at the streets. "We rule without saying we rule," he murmurs. "But make no mistake, boy, our enemies know exactly who we are. The Albizzi may be gone, but others wait. The Pazzi, old resentments, new jealousies." Lorenzo joins him at the window. Below, the city is waking fully. A group of apprentices laugh as they hurry past. A priest crosses himself as he passes a shrine. A merchant argues over the price of cloth. "It's a stage," Lorenzo says softly. "The whole city, and we are always being watched." "Exactly," Piero replies. "So you must give them something to see." Within a few years, that something becomes legend. Lorenzo steps into public life with a radiance Florence has rarely seen. Where Cosimo ruled from shadows and counting houses, Lorenzo moves under open sky. He organizes festivals where streets bloom with banners, where music spills from balconies and dancers whirl in bright costumes. He sponsors tournaments where young nobles tilt at one another with lances while crowds roar approval. During Carnival, masks turn the city into a river of hidden faces, and Lorenzo himself rides through the streets, throwing coins and verses, mixing with the people like a friend, like a king in everything but name. "Have you seen him?" a girl in the crowd whispers to her friend as Lorenzo passes, his cloak flaring, his smile wide. "They say he writes poems as well as any court poet." Her friend laughs. "They say he writes treaties better than most diplomats. Which do you think matters more?" "Both," the girl answers, surprising herself. "He makes the city feel alive." It is not only spectacle. The Medici Palace becomes a magnet for talent. The air inside its halls changes. It smells not just of wax and wool and money, but of pigment, marble dust, and ideas. In a high room, a young Sandro Botticelli bends over a panel, the faint outline of a woman taking shape beneath his brush. Nearby, an older sculptor argues with a patron about the tilt of a statue's head. In a corner, a scholar reads from a newly translated Greek text, his voice low and reverent, as if reading a prayer. Lorenzo moves among them with ease. "Show me," he says to Botticelli, stepping closer. The painter straightens, nervous. "It is nothing yet, Magnifico," he protests, using the nickname Florence has already given its shining Medici. Lorenzo's eyes roam over the faint forms of nymphs and breezes, of a sea that has not yet been colored. "It is potential," he corrects. "That is never nothing. Tell me what you see when you close your eyes and think of beauty." Botticelli hesitates, then begins to talk. The sea, the birth of Venus, the way cloth might cling to a body, the way hair might move in invisible wind. Lorenzo listens, not pretending to understand every technical detail, but deeply interested in the feeling, the vision. "Paint that," he says when the artist finishes. "Not what you think people expect. Paint what you see. Florence will learn to see it too." In another part of the city, in the garden of San Marco, a boy of unremarkable height but startling intensity chips away at a block of stone. His hands are strong, his expression fierce. "What are you making?" another boy asks him. "I'm freeing what's inside," the first boy replies without looking up. "Can't you see it, the figure trapped in there?" The second boy squints. "All I see is rock." "Then you are blind," the first says simply. His name is Michelangelo Buonarroti. He has come under Medici patronage because Lorenzo believes something about him, something he cannot yet prove. "Genius," Lorenzo says to a companion, watching the boy from a distance. "Rough, sharp-edged, but real. Florence must feed such men or it starves itself." In this theater of power, Lorenzo is both director and actor. He negotiates peace treaties between rival states with the same fluid grace he uses to compose love poems. He keeps Florence out of wars that could ruin its trade, preferring diplomacy to battle. But for all the music and art and light, there are shadows. The Pazzi family, wealthy, proud, and deeply resentful of Medici dominance, watch Lorenzo's glittering success with tightening jaws. At every feast it is his name they cheer, says Francesco de Pazzi, his fingers gripping the stem of his cup too tightly. At every council his words they heed. His uncle, stern and calculating, leans closer. Power dressed in velvet is still power, he says. Do not be fooled by the poems. The Medici are not just generous, they are dangerous. They have turned Florence into their stage. Perhaps it is time someone cut the ropes and let the scenery fall. In the churches, another voice rises. In the pulpit of Santa Maria del Fiore, a friar from Ferrara speaks with a passion that startles those who come expecting the usual mild homilies. His name is Girolamo Savonarola. His eyes burn, his voice cracks like a whip over the heads of his listeners. Florence, he cries, you drown in luxury. You deck yourselves in jewels, in fine fabrics, in painted walls, while sin grows in your hearts. You flock to festivals while your souls rot. And who leads you? Men who buy influence with banquets, who call their pride magnificence. Some shift uneasily, others scowl, a few nod, their faces grim. Lorenzo hears of this friar, of his fiery sermons. At first he laughs it off. Every golden age has its prophets of doom, he says lightly. Let him talk, words are wind. But wind over time can wear down stone. For now, Lorenzo's Florence still shines. In the evenings, the city glows with candlelight and song. From the Medici palace, the sound of lutes and flutes floats into the streets. In cloistered studies, scholars argue about Plato, about virtue, about the soul. In workshops, artists grind pigments, lapis into blue, cinnabar into red, turning earth into images that will outlast them all. Florence feels itself at the center of the world, a place where beauty and power walk hand in hand. Yet beneath the music, beneath the festivals, beneath the swirl of silk and the ring of gold, another rhythm waits, the steady, patient beat of envy. In the grand cathedral, where the great dome Cosimo helped fund now lifts its vast ribs toward heaven, footsteps echo on cool stone. Under the painted vaults and shafts of light, men in shadowed corners speak in low, careful tones. Plots are like paintings. They begin with faint lines barely visible. Soon, in this very space, under this roof built by pride and faith, steel will flash, blood will spatter the marble, and Florence will gasp as theater and reality collide. Because Lorenzo's stage is almost too perfect. And there are those who have decided that if they cannot share the spotlight, they will bring the whole theater down. The day-chosen foe. The blow is dressed in holiness. It is Sunday, April 26, 1478. The bells of Santa Maria del Fiore ring out over Florence, calling the faithful to mass. The great dome, Brunelleschi's miracle, rises above the city like a stone sky. Inside, incense curls in the air, and candles flicker against marble pillars. Lorenzo walks toward the cathedral with his brother Giuliano at his side. Giuliano is handsome in a way that seems careless: dark hair, open smile, an easy, generous heart. Where Lorenzo calculates, Giuliano feels. The people love him too, but with a softer affection. To them, he is the charming younger brother of the Magnificent, a Medici without the weight of policy on his shoulders. You should have stayed home, Lorenzo murmurs as they approach the steps. You're not well. Giuliano shrugs, trying to make light of the ache in his chest. And Miss Mass with half of Florence watching, they'd think the Medici had turned heathen. Lorenzo gives him a sideways look. You always were too worried about what others think. Giuliano smiles, says the man who dresses the city in festivals. They laugh, and for a moment, it is just two brothers on their way to church. Inside, the cathedral is crowded. The light that slips through high windows falls in pale beams, turning dust into dancing motes. The air is thick with murmurs, with the rustling of clothes, with the faint echo of footsteps on marble. Among the crowd move men whose faces are calm, but whose hearts beat hard and fast. Francesco de Pazzi is here, his jaw tight. Near him, a priest, his hand steady, walks with a dagger hidden in his sleeve instead of only a prayer on his lips. Others linger near the Medici, as if by chance. Each has a role. Each has promised himself that what is about to happen is necessary for Florence. Once they're gone, the Republic will be free. One conspirator had told himself in the sleepless hours before dawn. We are cutting off a cancer. But beneath the reasoning, beneath the political words, lies something simpler. Jealousy, hatred, fear of a family that seems able to charm even God. Mass begins. The voices of the choir rise, filling the vast space beneath the dome. Latin words float upward, carrying with them centuries of faith and doubt. The priest's voice is calm, measured, the ritual unfolding as it always does. Lorenzo kneels, head bowed, lips moving in quiet prayer. Beside him, Giuliano shifts slightly, hiding a cough. The conspirators glance at one another. This must happen at the right moment, when all eyes are lifted toward the altar, when the sound of the choir is strong enough to swallow a cry. Francesco feels sweat trickle down his spine. His hand closes around the hilt of his dagger. Now, it happens in an instant, and yet it feels stretched, slowed, as if time itself holds its breath. Hands reach for Giuliano, as if in greeting. A smile, a lean forward, and then steel flashes between bodies. Giuliano gasps, eyes wide, as blades plunge into him again and again. Blood blossoms on his doublet, dark and terrible. He falls, the sound of his body striking the marble lost in the swell of music suddenly broken by screams. Lorenzo turns at the first cry, confusion snapping into horror. He sees his brother on the floor, sees the red pool spreading around him, sees men he thought he knew with murder in their faces. They turn toward him. A priest lunges, dagger aimed at Lorenzo's throat. Lorenzo throws up his arm, feeling the burn of steel slicing through skin. Another attacker surges forward, but his blow glances off as Lorenzo twists, shoving a bench between them. Instinct, not strategy, guides him now. Run, someone shouts, he will never know who. Hands grab him, pull him backward. His own men, loyal and swift, close around him, forming a shield of bodies. A dagger catches his neck, tearing flesh but not deep enough to kill. Warm blood trickles down his chest. The cathedral erupts. Screams echo, high and panicked. Some people drop to the ground, hands over their heads. Others stampede toward the doors. Candles topple, wax spilling, flames guttering. The sweet smell of incense twists with the metallic stink of fresh blood. Giuliano lies in a spreading stain, eyes staring sightless at the painted heavens above. A woman nearby sobs uncontrollably. A child clings to his father, screaming. The conspirators shout their truth into the chaos. Liberty, one cries. Death to the tyrants, the Medici are finished. But the word does not catch the way they expect. It floats, confused, over horror. Lorenzo's supporters, enraged, shout back. Assassins, murderers, in God's house. Lorenzo is hustled into the sacristy, the small chamber off the main nave, heavy doors slammed shut behind him. His breathing is harsh, his side throbbing. Blood stains his sleeve and neck, but he is alive. A trusted ally, his face pale, looks him over quickly. The wounds are not deep, he says. Thanks be to God. Lorenzo's mind is already leaping. Forward, Giuliano, he demands. The man hesitates. That hesitation is answer enough. For a moment, sound seems to leave the room. Lorenzo feels an emptiness open up inside his chest, vast and cold. His brother, his other self, gone. He presses a hand against the wall to steady himself. There is no time to grieve. Listen to me, he says, voice rough but firm. Bar the doors, get word to our allies, to the palazzo. The Pazzi have shown their hand. Now Florence must choose. Outside, the city roars. News rushes from the cathedral like fire on dry straw. They killed Giuliano, they tried to kill Lorenzo. People spill into the streets, faces raw with shock and fury. The Pazzi, someone hisses. It was the Pazzi in the cathedral. In God's house, a baker repeats outraged, like thieves in a sanctuary. The Pazzi had counted on a swift, decisive blow, followed by a quick seizure of power. Instead, they have created a scene of sacred horror that turns the crowd's stomachs. In the Palazzo Vecchio, officials scramble, voices layered over one another. What has happened? Lorenzo dead. No, wounded alive. Giuliano. Dead, stabbed like an animal. Lorenzo, once secured and bandaged, makes his way to the palazzo under heavy guard. People surge around him. Magnifico, they cry, some reaching out, tears streaming down their faces. We thought. I live, he tells them, though the words feel like they belong to someone else. But my brother, Florence, will answer for him. There is a new look in his eyes now. The easy charm is gone, burned away by the sight of Giuliano's broken body on the cathedral floor. What remains is something harder. In the hours that follow, the city becomes a storm. Pazzi houses are surrounded, doors are kicked in, men are dragged out, some half-dressed, their faces white with terror. The conspirators who failed to flee are captured, beaten, thrown into makeshift cells. Francesco de Pazzi, wounded and wild-eyed, is hauled through the streets. The crowd claws at him, screaming curses. Traitor! Butcher! He is hanged from the windows of the palazzo, his body swinging above the square where he once walked as a respected noble. Beside him, the archbishop who blessed the plot meets the same fate. A man of God, now a warning in flesh. The scene is brutal, public, unmistakable. Florence has chosen. That night the city is strangely quiet. The rage has burned itself for the moment into exhaustion. Fires burn low. The streets, still stained in places, lie mostly empty. In a darkened room of the Medici palace, Lorenzo sits alone for a while, the bandage at his neck stained, the weight of recent hours pressing on him like stone. On the table before him lies a bloody doublet, Giuliano's. Lorenzo's hand trembles slightly as he touches the fabric. His throat tightens. You fool, he whispers into the silence. You kind fool, you should have stayed home. The door opens softly. A monk steps in, his face thin, his eyes intense. Savonarola. He has come not to offer comfort, but something else. Magnifico, he says, bowing his head. You have been spared, perhaps for a reason. Lorenzo looks up sharply. To avenge my brother, he asks, voice raw. To consider your soul, Savonarola replies. Blood has stained God's house. Power games have entered the temple. Florence must repent. Lorenzo's jaw tightens. Florence has defended itself, he says, against treachery. Savonarola's eyes do not soften. And yet, he murmurs, even righteous anger can become sin if it loves vengeance more than justice. They hold each other's gaze in the dim light, two very different men, each claiming to care for Florence's future. Outside, the city recovers from its shock and slowly returns to its glittering life. Festivals resume. Art continues to bloom, yet something has changed. Lorenzo the Magnificent is now not only a patron and poet, but a survivor of an attempted slaughter. His rule, unofficial though it remains, is hardened by that knowledge. He will hold Florence more tightly now. But in the pulpits, in the corners where simple people huddle and pray, Savonarola's warnings grow louder. Fire, he cries. Fire is coming if you do not turn from your vanities. For the moment, most prefer the music, the colors, the warmth of Lorenzo's world. The prophecy sounds distant, like thunder on the edge of a clear sky. But thunder has a way of drawing closer. And when Lorenzo's light finally begins to fade, the shadows that have waited so patiently in Florence will erupt into flame. Fire, exile, and the bonfire of vanities. The last days of Lorenzo, the magnificent do not feel magnificent at all. He lies in a villa at Cergi, outside Florence, far from the noise of festivals and the glitter of court poets. The room smells of herbs and smoke, of sweat and candle wax. Outside the window, the Tuscan hills roll away in soft green waves, but Lorenzo's eyes are drawn inward now, to memories and unfinished accounts. Pain has made him thin. The once vigorous body that rode in tournaments and danced at feasts is worn down, joints swollen, breath short. Yet in his face there is still a trace of the old warmth, the intelligence that made Florence bend toward him without quite realizing how. Around his bed stand priests, doctors, family. Somewhere in the house, servants move with hushed footsteps, as if noise alone could shatter the fragile thread holding their world together. One man is notably absent. Savonarola, the fire-tongued friar, has been summoned. Lorenzo himself asked for him. Perhaps, at the edge of death, the magnificent hopes for a final absolution, a balancing of the ledger between his love of beauty and the sins that came with power. But Savonarola does not come. He has already turned his back on the Medici court, condemning its luxuries from the pulpit. "Florence," he cries, "your jewels blind you to your own decay. Your paintings hide the cracks in your soul." To him, Lorenzo's patronage of art is not salvation, but temptation. Instead, another priest leans close, murmuring prayers. Lorenzo's lips move faintly, echoing the words. In the corners of the room, shadows gather like silent witnesses. "Have I done enough?" he whispers at one point, voice raw, "for Florence?" No one answers. They cannot know. History will decide that long after this candle has burned out. On April 8, 1492, Lorenzo de Medici dies. News runs ahead of the official messengers, as it always does. By the time the bells toll, Florence already knows. In workshops, tools still. In markets, bargaining pauses. Greengrocers, blacksmiths, bakers, ordinary men and women stand in doorways, staring toward the north, toward Cergi. The magnificent is gone, someone says quietly. Now who will keep the peace? Now who will keep the wolves away? For years, Lorenzo's skill and diplomacy, his gold, his charm, have kept Florence balanced on a narrow beam between powerful neighbors. Milan, Naples, the papacy, France. He has juggled friendships and rivalries like a jester with blazing torches. With him gone, the torches fall. His son, Piero, inherits the name and the position, but not the talent. People call him the unfortunate even before history makes it official. He is handsome, impulsive, easily frightened and easily flattered, everything Florence is not inclined to forgive. In the Medici palace, the atmosphere shifts. The conversations in the great hall feel thinner, the decisions less sure. Piero tries to imagine himself walking in his father's steps, but every corridor seems too wide, every chair too large. One evening, as thunder rolls over the hills, he paces before a map laid open on the table. Across it, like a dark smudge, moves the rumor of an army. "He is really coming?" Piero asks a nervous advisor. "The King of France." "They say so, Magnifico," the man answers, using the old title though it sits awkwardly now. "Charles VII marches south. He claims rights to the throne of Naples. To reach it, he must pass through our lands." Piero swallows. "Then we make an alliance, we do as father did, we talk, we charm, we—" The advisor hesitates. "Your father had years to build relationships. You have months." Far away in France, Charles VII is indeed marching. A young, reckless king with a head full of knights and crusades, leading an army that will soon show Italy a new kind of war, with cannons that roar like thunder and tear stone like paper. When he crosses into Tuscan territory, the ground itself seems to tremble with the weight of his soldiers. Florence watches, breath held. Should they resist him, welcome him, bargain? Piero rushes between positions, uncertain, trying to thread a path that is already fraying beneath his feet. In the churches, Savonarola's voice grows stronger. "This is God's scourge," he declares from the pulpit, his hands raised high, his eyes blazing. "A foreign king sent to punish Italy for its corruption, its pride, its sin. Florence, choose now whom you will serve, gold or God." People listen. Many shrug. Some nod deeply, their hearts already heavy with doubts about their city's wealth and decadence. Then Piero makes his fatal move. Instead of standing firm, instead of negotiating from strength, he rides out to meet Charles VIII and surrenders far too much, far too quickly. He agrees to humiliating terms, to opening fortresses, to bending Florence's pride. When word reaches the city, something in the Florentine spirit snaps. Lorenzo kept kings at arm's length. A blacksmith growls in a tavern, his fist slamming the table. His son rolls over like a dog. Medici, a weaver, scoffs. He is no Medici, he is a boy playing at greatness. At first the anger is muttered, then it grows. In the Piazza della Signoria, crowds gather. They shout, they argue, they remember. They remember Cosimo, who returned from exile with humility and strength. They remember Lorenzo, who faced down conspirators in a blood-stained cathedral and kept the peace. They compare them to Piero, and the comparison is cruel. "The Medici have betrayed Florence," someone cries. "Cast them out," another voice answers. The words spread like sparks in dry straw. In the Medici palace, Piero feels the ground shake, though the stones do not move. Messengers arrive breathless. "The people are in the streets," one gasps. They march toward the palace. Piero's face drains of color. "To cheer?" he asks weakly. The silence that follows is answer enough. He looks at the walls hung with paintings, at the statues in the courtyard, at the rooms that have been filled with poetry and politics, laughter and secrets. All this, he realizes, can become a prison as easily as a home. "Prepare the horses," he whispers. We should leave until this settles." It will not settle. That night, under a sky lined with thin gray clouds, the Medici family rides out of Florence once more, not in chains, not formally exiled by decree, but driven by the roar of their own city's anger. The gates close behind them with a heavy finality. This time, there are no crowds murmuring in sympathy, no priests blessing the departing figure of a wise banker. There is only a buzzing sense of relief mixed with fear. "They are gone," someone says in the street the next morning. "The Medici are gone." "And who rules us now?" "Florence herself," comes the answer, hopeful, uncertain. Into the vacuum steps Savonarola. He has preached for years. Now, suddenly, people look at him not just as a prophet but as a leader. In the pulpit of the cathedral, his voice echoes like thunder. "The tyrants have fallen," he cries. "The corrupt have been cast down. Now, Florence, you must become the city of God. You must cleanse yourself." He does not speak in vague phrases. He is precise. He names vanities. Jewelry, fine clothes, mirrors, luxurious furniture, dice, cards, songs, poems that celebrate lust instead of virtue, paintings that delight the eye but do not lift the soul. "You have filled your homes with idols," he thunders. "You have turned your hearts to gold and marble. Burn them, cast them out. Make Florence a new Jerusalem." At first, people are hesitant, give up their beautiful things, their entertainments, the tokens of a golden age. But the city is shaken, its old certainties shattered. Fear and guilt mingle with resentment of the rich. And Savonarola, for all his harshness, offers something Lorenzo never could, the promise of purity, of meaning beyond pleasure. Children become his fiercest followers. They form little bands, patrolling the streets, singing hymns, knocking on doors. "Have you vanities to give?" they ask, "for the cleansing of Florence?" Women bring out necklaces, delicate with pearls and gold. Men hand over playing cards, books of poetry, love letters tied with faded ribbon. Actors surrender costumes, musicians their instruments. A great pyre is built, in the Piazza della Signoria. The day of the bonfire is cold, but the square seethes with heat even before the flames are lit. Piles of objects rise in the center, mirrors reflecting the gray sky, dresses in rich hues, paintings whose saints and nymphs will never again be seen, masks from festivals, wigs, carved chests playing boards. The smell is strange at first, old wood, cloth, dust. Then, as the fire catches and climbs, it becomes something harsher, burning paint, hair, glue, varnish. Smoke coils upward, carrying with it the ghosts of 1,000 private joys. Savonarola watches, face set, as the flames roar higher. "This is the bonfire of vanities," he proclaims. "This is Florence shedding her sins." In the crowd some cheer, eyes shining with fervor. Others watch in silence, grief lodged like a stone in their throats. An old woman clutches the hands of her granddaughter. "That was your mother's dress," she whispers, as a swirl of blue silk collapses into embers. A painter stands at the edge, fists clenched, as a canvas he once labored over curls and blackens. "They said it tempted the flesh," he mutters. "I only meant to show beauty." The city that once sang under Lorenzo's festival banners now hums with stern hymns. Carnival masks are replaced with dour faces. Laughter grows cautious. Florence has traded one kind of theater for another. Instead of the stage of Lorenzo's joyous performances, it now lives inside Savonarola's drama of sin and salvation. The props are different, but the stakes feel higher. Yet even as the bonfire flames lick the sky, somewhere in a distant palazzo in exile, a Medici looks toward Florence and does not see an ending. Only a city burning through another act. Because fire does not only destroy. Sometimes it clears the ground. For something to grow back. From bankers to princes, legacy of a dynasty. Night settles over Rome with a weight that feels almost holy. Torches flicker in the courtyards of the Vatican. Marble pillars cast long, solemn shadows. The air tastes of incense, old stone, and Poe. Were the kind of power that once flowed modestly through the counting houses of Florence, but now echoes in vaulted halls gilded with gold. At the center of it sits a man wearing crimson. Giovanni de Medici, son of Lorenzo the Magnificent, once a wandering exile, now Pope Leo X, reclines in a carved wooden chair, his expression one of comfortable satisfaction. A servant pours wine into a golden cup. Musicians pluck soft notes from lutes in a corner. Cardinals whisper along the edges of the room, their conversations half political calculation, half reverence. Leo lifts the cup, savoring the scent before he drinks. "Well," he murmurs with a smile, "since God has granted us the papacy." He does not need to finish the sentence. Everyone in the room knows the rest. Let us enjoy it. The Medici, once mere merchants in a city of competing guilds, have risen beyond even Cosimo's boldest dreams. They have not only shaped Florence, they have occupied the very throne of St. Peter. Their journey from banking tables to papal authority is a transformation almost too astonishing to believe. But Rome knows better than anyone. Power flows where money flows, and the Medici have never forgotten how to keep that river moving. Still, Leo's rise is not the end of the story. Far from Florence, in the glittering courts of France, another Medici walks a different, more dangerous path. Catherine de' Medici arrives in Paris as a young girl, small, dark-eyed, carrying more suspicion than luggage. She has been married off into the French royal family, her Medici blood almost a stain in the eyes of proud French nobles. Whispers chase her through the halls. Merchant's daughter. Banker's kin. Not noble enough. Why her? Catherine hears everything, though she seldom responds. She watches, she studies, she survives. Court life is a maze of alliances and betrayals, and Catherine moves through it with a quiet, calculating grace. She learns which smiles hide knives. She learns which enemies must be feared, and which can be turned into tools. In time, she becomes queen, then regent. Her sons, weak, sickly kings, cannot hold the throne without her. France swirls with religious conflict, with tension so sharp it feels like the air might snap. France is a tinderbox, an advisor tells her late one night as they stand before a map lit by candlelight. One spark, and the whole kingdom will burn. Catherine places a hand on the table, her fingers steady. Then we must learn to control the flame, she replies. She does not escape blame for the blood that follows. History will debate her role in the violence. The St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, the religious wars, the dark rumors of poison. But beneath every accusation lies a truth. Catherine did exactly what a Medici always does. She adapted, she endured, she shaped the world before it could swallow her. Back in Italy, another branch of the family rises. Cosimo de Medici, sharp-minded, iron-willed, nothing like the soft nobles who once mocked his family, seizes Florence with precision. The city, exhausted from chaos, welcomes a firm hand more readily than it admits. Cosimo transforms the Medici from unofficial rulers into Grand Dukes of Tuscany, a title that sounds like marble and permanence. Under his command, fortresses rise along the coast. Soldiers drill in open squares. Courts become organized, efficient, formidable. In the city he governs, he walks through the Uffizi, once administrative offices, now a place where the echoes of power mingle with art, and pauses before a map of the Arno Valley. Tuscany must be unified, he says to an advisor, not just in name, in purpose, in identity. And he succeeds. Through treaty and force, diplomacy and steel, Cosimo transforms a scattered, quarrelsome region into a stable, centralized state. Under his reign, Tuscany becomes more than a patchwork of rival towns. It becomes a duchy, a domain, a Medici possession. For a time, it seems as if the family will endure forever. But power, like wealth, is a current that never stays still. As the decades roll forward, the later Medici grow softer, less visionary, less needed. They hold their titles but lose their influence, their innovation, their edge. The bank that built their empire begins to falter. Branches close, debts accumulate. The ledgers once so meticulously kept become burdens instead of tools. The Medici, once stronger than Florence itself, begin to drift like autumn leaves in a slow, spiraling descent. And yet, something remarkable remains. In the corridors of the Uffizi, sunlight pools on polished floors. Echoes linger in the vaulted rooms. Paintings, Botticelli's Venus rising from her shell, the Madonna of the Magnificat, portraits of young nobles and unnamed saints, glow with color as vivid as the day they were painted. Michelangelo's early works still breathe, with the tension of potential. Brunelleschi's dome still dominates the skyline, an impossible dream made stone. Libraries funded by M. Edisi Gold still cradle manuscripts that might otherwise have disappeared into dust. Tourists walk the streets of Florence, unaware that the cobblestones beneath their feet were once shaped by the decisions of bankers who pretended not to rule, but ruled all the same. Tables in quiet cafes stand not far from the site of altars where daggers flashed. Shadows fall over the Piazza della Signoria, where once the bonfire of Vanities roared. The Palazzo Medici still stands, its interior filled with frescoes of triumph and tragedy. Even as the Medici bloodline withers, their world does not. Florence today still carries their fingerprints on every canvas, every chapel, every stone archway shaped during the Renaissance they bankrolled. Their love of art, their hunger for influence, their ambition that reached from Guildhall to papal throne, all of it lingers, haunting the city like a beautiful ghost. In the galleries of the Uffizi, footsteps echo softly. A visitor pauses before a portrait of Cosimo the Elder, the quiet banker who started it all. The painting shows a man with calm eyes, a mind always calculating, always watching. Then the visitor steps before a depiction of Lorenzo the Magnificent, elegant and thoughtful, a poet-statesman who tried to make Florence a stage where beauty could bloom. And finally, the visitor moves to a portrait of a Medici pope, draped in crimson, smiling like a man who has not only won the game, but changed the rules entirely. The light through the high windows shifts, dusk glitters in the beam. Outside, the Arno flows on, as it always has, carrying past glories in its silent current. The age of the Medici is long gone, but the world they ignited still burns. It burns in the frescoes. It burns in the domes. It burns in every idea born in a city that dared to dream it could shape humanity. And in that sense, the Medici never died. They simply stepped into history, leaving the rest of us to walk through the Renaissance they built, one stone, one poem, one brushstroke at a time. This is an imagined political thriller story, not a real classified leak or inside intelligence.